strategies and federal support needed to prepare for and respond to an increasingly sophisticated cyber threat environment. Today's hearing examines the current threat landscape, evaluates the effectiveness of federal support programs, and explores how we can strengthen cyber resilience at every level of government. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. I think we have New York, Florida, Virginia, and the great state of Tennessee represented, and if I mess that up, you can feel free to correct me. But I truly appreciate you being here, the men and women on the front lines of cybersecurity in our states and local communities for traveling here today. The cyber threat facing America's states, cities, and counties today looks nothing like it did just 5 years ago. Nation-state actors, ransomware groups, and criminal organizations have grown more capable, more persistent, and more willing to target systems that Americans rely on every day. Artificial intelligence is changing this fight in both directions. State and local governments are beginning to use AI to detect threats faster, respond more efficiently, and do more with limited staff. But our adversaries are also using those same capabilities against us, crafting more convincing phishing attacks, finding vulnerabilities faster, and carrying out operations at once that otherwise required specific expertise or specialized. The witnesses with us today have played a key role in helping their states embrace digital transformation and expand access to government services. But with this increased connectivity comes a larger attack surface and a greater level of risk. Just last week, a ransom attack on Convenes shut down classes for students and faculty in the middle of final exams. Hospitals have had to turn away patients and cancel surgeries when their systems were held hostage. State agencies have gone offline for weeks, cutting seniors off from benefits they have earned and depend on. And water utilities have had their control systems probed and in some cases compromised. Each of these incidents has a real human cost, and they're happening more and more often. The core problem is a mismatch that Congress has an obligation to address. State and local governments are expected to defend against the same adversaries our intelligence community tracks, including China, Russia, and Iran. But with budgets and workforces that bear no comparison to what those nation states deploy against us, a county government in rural America may not have a single dedicated cybersecurity professional, and yet that county holds sensitive data on its residents, runs systems that deliver essential services, and sits inside a network of American infrastructure that our adversaries are actively working to disrupt. I know this from personal experience. Before I came to Congress, I served as county executive in Tennessee. We had no dedicated cybersecurity staff and a tight budget. And we still had an obligation to protect our residents' data and keep our government running. This is in part why the testimony we will hear today matters so much to me. To their credit, states have not been waiting for Washington to figure this out. Today we will hear about whole-of-state cybersecurity strategies that push resources and expertise down to counties and municipalities that they could not otherwise afford. We will hear about information sharing programs that give smaller jurisdictions access to threat intelligence they could never build on their own. We'll hear about workforce programs developed with universities and community colleges to train the next generation of defenders. These are real solutions, and they deserve real support from Congress. But state efforts can only go so far without federal support. Congress recognized that in 2021 when we created the State and Local Cybersecurity Grant Program and put $1 billion behind it over 4 years. The premise was simple. A small town faces the same threats as a large city, and a rural county is not exempt from Chinese or Russian cyber actors just because it has a limited IT budget. That program helped communities that could not otherwise help themselves. Unless Congress acts, that program expires this September. We should not let that happen, and we certainly should not let it happen at a moment when the threat is growing ever worse. That is why I'm committed to enacting the Pillar Act, which we passed, and we sent to the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Reauthorization alone is not enough. We have 4 years of program history now, and we owe it to taxpayers to ask whether the money is being spent well, whether the structure is right, and whether the outcomes match the investment. Today is an opportunity to get honest answers from people who have actually run these programs. I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses, especially Tennessee, and using that to drive our actions as we go forward. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Ramirez, for 5 minutes for her opening statement. Ma'am.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, good afternoon. I want to start by expressing my solidarity with the Islamic Center of San Diego and my condolences to the families of Amin Abdullah, Mansour Kasiha, and Nadir Awad, who were murdered in a horrific hate-fueled attack on the Muslim community. I want to say this because it's really important. We have to recommit ourselves to rooting out violence and hatred in all its forms. Since the incident, we've learned that the two suspects espoused hateful views about Muslims, about Islam, Jewish people, LGBTQ+ community, Black people, and people across the political spectrum. They also expressed beliefs that white people are being eliminated, echoing the dangerous white supremacist great replacement theory. I raise these details in our subcommittee because as members of Congress, we have to remember that our words matter. Words matter to 6-year-old Wade Afayumi of Illinois, who was murdered because of dangerous anti-Palestinian rhetoric. There are too many examples of children put at risk by reckless misinformation and propaganda that fuels heinous attacks. And we, as elected officials, have an obligation to hold ourselves to the highest standards, rejecting dehumanizing rhetoric and working to end all forms of bigotry so that no children, no family, no community around the country has to suffer as a result. In addition to being responsible for our words, today we address our responsibility to address cybersecurity threats facing our state and local governments. We are facing a rapidly evolving landscape. The administration initiated an unlawful military operation against Iran, a country with a track record of responding to military operations via cyber capabilities. Last month, Anthropic announced a Mythos preview, a highly capable AI model that has proven to be exceptionally effective at identifying vulnerabilities in software and exploiting for them. And in less than 6 months, state and local governments will administer the midterm elections, a target of past foreign interference efforts. While our work should be focused on responding to the rapidly changing cyber landscape and supporting state and local governments to defend against cybersecurity threats, the administration has been doing the opposite. It's eviscerated the workforce at Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, leaving us with 1,100 vacancies. It's eliminated CISA's election security team and defunded the Multi-State Information Sharing Analysis Center and the Election Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center. It's reassigned cybersecurity professionals to ICE, and even the FBI cybersecurity staff have been stretched thin. There are real consequences when the federal government guts the personnel and the resources that we have dedicated to identifying cybersecurity risk and mitigating them. And that's why this subcommittee hearing is so important, because state and local governments store significantly personally identifiable information about people in our communities, information about our school children, to those receiving public benefits, to even information on our small business owners. Failing to support cybersecurity efforts at the state and local level puts that information at risk, and it actually jeopardizes the privacy of the public. State and local governments have also had the responsibility of administering free, fair, and secure elections. It is the federal government's responsibility to ensure they have the support and the resources to be able to do such this. And thanks to the efforts of Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, the former chair of the subcommittee, the federal government invested over $1 billion over the last 4 years in state and local cybersecurity through state and local cybersecurity grant programs. But the program issued its final grants in year 2025. So while I appreciate the efforts of the full and subcommittee chairman to extend this important program, I am concerned that leadership doesn't have a plan to move this bill forward. The officials I've spoken to have articulated frustration that so many of the CISA personnel that they relied on for so many years and trusted no longer work at the agency. And support to the MS-ISAC and the EISAC was also eliminated. So if Congress doesn't reauthorize the state and local cybersecurity grant program, the message will be reinforcing that you are on your own. And I find that to be unacceptable. We have to change course, and we need to renew the state and local cybersecurity grant program because that is a step in the right direction. I look forward to hearing the witnesses' perspectives on this point in particular. And before I close, Chairman, I'd like to submit the following statements for the record. A statement from the Center for Internet Security, which houses the MS-ISAC. a report from the Bipartisan Policy Center, R Street, and the Institute for Responsive Government, and the Consortium for School Networking. With that, I yield back to the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you to the ranking member Ramirez, and I would like, if I may, to echo her comments. We can have political, religious disagreements, but violence is never acceptable. Whether it's the attacks against the president, against members of Congress, individuals in our community, or at the mosque. So with that, we'll take a quick moment of silence. Thank you. Members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I'm pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this important topic. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, I ask our witnesses to please rise and raise their right hands. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony that you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States of the House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you, and please be seated. I would like to now formally introduce our witnesses. Ms. Kristen Darby is the Chief Information Officer from the fantastic and amazing and great state of Tennessee. I may have a little bias there, where she oversees technology strategy, innovation, and solutions for government services. She previously served as the CIO at various healthcare companies and has over 25 years of experience in the public sector, healthcare, finance, operations, biotech, cybersecurity, and insurance. Mr. Colin
Ahern, sir.
Ahern, thank you, sir. He's the newly appointed Director of Security and Intelligence for the state of New York, where he coordinates the state's security assets on national security and intelligence matters. He most recently served as the first Chief Cyber Officer, held cyber leadership roles for New York City, and served in the U.S. Army. Thank you for your service, sir. Mr. Warren Sponholtz is the Chief Information Officer for the state of Florida, where he leads the Florida Digital Service in modernizing IT infrastructure and strengthening the state's cybersecurity defenses. He previously served as Deputy Chief Information Security Officer at Florida Digital Service, as CIO of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and as a United States Marine. Also, sir, thank you for your service. Mr. Samir Jain is Vice President of Policy at the Center for Democracy and Technology, where he leads policy advocacy and guides the organization's policy agenda and strategy. Mr. Jain helped shape national cybersecurity strategy and coordinate cyber policy in various positions in the Obama administration, and he was a partner at 2 international law firms. I thank each of our distinguished witnesses for being here today. I now recognize Ms. Darby for 5 minutes to summarize her opening statement.
Chairman Ogles, Ranking Member Ramirez, and the distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the great state of Tennessee. I'm Kristen Darby, and I serve as Chief Information Officer for the state of Tennessee and oversee strategic technology solutions, the state's centralized information technology organization, supporting 21 executive branch agencies and approximately 45,000 state employees. I also serve as the co-chair of Tennessee's Artificial Intelligence Council and the state's Cybersecurity Council. Cybersecurity is no longer simply a technology issue. It's a matter of public safety, economic safety, and national defense. State and local governments operate critical systems that citizens rely on every day, including emergency services, schools, utilities, courts, and public infrastructure. Those systems are increasingly targeted by criminal organizations and nation-state actors. In Tennessee, we are seeing rapid growth of AI-enabled attacks, ransomware activity, and exploitation of cloud and identity systems. The pace of these threats continues to accelerate. At the same time, many local governments across our state have little or no dedicated cybersecurity staff. This creates a dangerous imbalance between highly sophisticated attackers and severely resource-constrained defenders. We are also entering a new phase of cybersecurity risks driven by advanced large language models and artificial intelligence. Emerging capabilities are accelerating vulnerability discovery and compressing the timeframe between identification, exploitation, and remediation. Tennessee has responded with a whole-of-state cybersecurity approach focused on partnership, coordination, and scalable shared services under the leadership of our state CISO, Curtis Clan. Through our statewide engagement efforts, we have engaged more than 1,500 organizations, reached over 3,000 public sector points of contact, and achieved #1 ranking in the US with the nationwide cybersecurity review completions in both 2024 and 2025. Most importantly, we are seeing measurable results. Organizations that participated consistently over 3 years demonstrated a 19.2% increase in overall cybersecurity maturity. Through the state and local cybersecurity grant program, Tennessee has secured 89,684 endpoints across local government. We've trained more than 21,000 local government employees, and we've expanded access to endpoint detection, cybersecurity training, firewalls, disaster recovery capabilities, and managed services. Many of these local governments simply could not deploy or sustain these capabilities on their own. The grant program has also strengthened trust, communication, and overall coordination between state and local government in ways that continue benefiting Tennessee well beyond individual grant cycles. However, the demand for cybersecurity support far exceeds the current funding levels. While Tennessee received approximately $21 million of federal funding across 4 grant cycles, we could have effectively utilized several times that amount to address identified needs across our local communities. Without continued funding, local governments will lose access to critical cybersecurity services. Managed protections will disappear, and the momentum we have built through the whole-of-state approach will slow at precisely the wrong time. Cyber adversaries are not slowing down, and neither can we. Based on Tennessee's experience, I respectfully encourage Congress to consider continued appropriated funding for the state and local cybersecurity grant program, lower and stabilized cost share requirements, improving real-time threat intelligence sharing, and establishing a rapid response funding mechanism that allows states to react quickly to emerging threats and zero-day vulnerabilities. The scale, speed, and complexity of today's threat environment requires the ability to respond at the pace of emerging threats. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to participating in the questions.
Thank you, Ms. Darby. Now recognize Mr. Ahern for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman Ogles, Ranking Member Ramirez, Chairman Garbarino, Ranking Member Thompson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am Colin Ahern, New York's Director of Security and Intelligence. I want to thank Chairman Ogles for sponsoring the Pillar Act, Ranking Member Ramirez for the critical perspective she has brought to this subcommittee, and Chairman Garbarino and Ranking Member Thompson for their sustained focus on state and local cyber readiness. Our states are on the front lines of multiple cyber conflicts, yet we are being asked to manage nation-state risks while our federal partners step back. The coming expiration of the state and local cybersecurity grant program, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency workforce shrunk by 1/3 with no Senate-confirmed director, and the cancellation of multi-state information sharing and analysis center funding are dismantling tools that keep our communities safe. We are at a critical juncture. Artificial intelligence continues to collapse the technical barriers that once separated nation-state capability from everyone else. New tools are compressing the time of vulnerability attack to exploitation from weeks to hours, and these capabilities will soon be present in freely available open-weight models, including from China. The window to harden our defenses is not years, it is months. To prepare for today's and tomorrow's risks, Governor Hochul last year signed the Responsible Artificial Intelligence and Safety Act, one of the country's first state-level safety frameworks for frontier artificial intelligence models. However, we can only succeed together. Adversary nation-states continue pre-positioning inside critical infrastructure, stealing our intellectual property, perpetuating hybrid attacks, all while sheltering the ransomware crews that assail our communities every day. These threats are converging. The same criminal cryptocurrency infrastructure that drives billions of dollars in fraud also funds ransomware, helps bad actors evade sanctions, and lets anyone rent capabilities from professional cyber criminals. We are leaving our communities to fend for themselves against the world's most sophisticated digital adversaries. Federal action against that infrastructure and those adversaries reaches where state defenders in the private sector cannot. We need more of it, and our defense depends on it. New York is a national leader in cyber. Under Governor Hochul's leadership, we have built a whole-of-state model, consolidated intelligence and security leadership, the nation's most robust state-level cybersecurity operations center, mandatory municipal cyber incident reporting, and critical cyber defense shared services. Our shared services protect over 100,000 county and local government computers in an operations center staffed by nearly 60 civil servants and 6 members of our National Guard. And by leveraging the state's purchasing power and economies of scale, the state is saving county and local governments over $19 million a year and providing cyber-sophisticated tools that localities, frequent targets for cyber attacks, could not employ on their own. New York has also invested an additional $7.4 million in expanding the New York State Police Cyber Analysis Units, Computer Crimes Unit, and Internet Crimes Against Children Center. New York is committed to evolving our cyber defenses as threats evolve so that we can remain an effective partner to the federal government and the private sector. My written testimony contains 6 recommendations. I would like to highlight 2. First, reauthorize and fully fund the state and local cybersecurity grant program, which is the single most consequential investment in the cyber protection of state and local governments in this country. In New York, this program is currently delivering over 112,000 multi-factor authentication hard tokens to local governments and school districts. Without reauthorization and stable, long-term appropriations, the consequences for state and local cyber defense will be immediate and severe. To improve the program's impact, we should also reduce unnecessary burdens and restrictions that currently make it harder for states to deploy enterprise-grade software-as-a-service shared services over multiple years. Second, end 2-tiered frontier model AI access. State and local governments protect the energy grid, the drinking water supply, the public health system, and the everyday operations of government. We cannot do that while frontier defensive AI capabilities are restricted to federal partners and a handful of large enterprises. Cybersecurity is the silent partner of democracy. When the utilities, school districts, and state and local governments that constitute the operational fabric of American life are hollowed out by cyber attacks, the institutions that support our democratic life are hollowed out with them. The recommendations in my testimony are the elements of a single proposition, that the institutions of self-government in this country are worth defending against threats that do not respect state lines or international borders, and that doing so demands a federal government that is a partner to all 50 states. New York is ready to do its part. We want and need the federal government as our partner in this essential work. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hearn. I now recognize Mr. Sponholz for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Ogles, Ranking Member Ramirez, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the privilege to speak before you today. My name is Warren Sponholz, and I serve as the State Chief Information Officer and Director of the Florida Digital Service. I'd just like to start with saying that I appreciate the subcommittee's attention on existing and emerging cybersecurity threats that face this nation every day. Florida is a large and attractive target. It's the 3rd most populous state with roughly 23 million residents. Florida also includes nearly 500 counties and municipalities. It's home to major military commands, premier educational institutions, seaports, airports, and spaceports. But no matter where an attack is focused, our adversaries see us as one target, and our job is to build one coordinated defense. Nation-state activity has become a greater threat for state and local governments. The adversarial use of artificial intelligence is fundamentally changing the speed and scale of cyber threats facing state and local governments. We are rapidly approaching an era of AI-driven vulnerability identification and rapid exploit development. Additionally, China's actions have changed the conversation around critical infrastructure. Campaigns commonly referred as Volt Typhoon and Salt Typhoon show that foreign adversaries are not only seeking data, they're positioning themselves in critical sectors in ways that would matter during a crisis. For Florida, that means we must not just monitor for obvious disruption, but also for quiet, long-term access that may be designed to remain undetected for years. This is changing how we conduct threat analysis, from long-term log retention and alerting thresholds to how we detect quiet persistence before it becomes an operational disruption. The center of that effort and a priority for Governor DeSantis is Florida's Cybersecurity Operations Center, or CSOC, housed within the Florida Digital Service. The CSOC serves as the state's central threat clearinghouse, monitors threats across the state enterprise, supports incident response, helps agencies and partners move from isolated alerting to coordinated detection and response. Threat intelligence is central to that program. Florida draws from numerous sources, including federal partners, law enforcement, multi-state coalitions, and cybersecurity vendors. But intelligence is only useful when it's operationally relevant. Agencies and local partners need timely, contextual information that matters to them. The federal government has been an essential partner in this work. Federal intelligence collection and sharing brings national visibility that no individual state can replicate. Florida adds state and local context to that national view. Critical infrastructure is also a major focus of Governor DeSantis' strategy. Florida continues to work with critical infrastructure providers to better understand the investment needed and where systemic risks exist. We use assessment data and the Department of Energy's Cybersecurity Capability Maturity Model, or C2M2, to support consistent discussions about risk, maturity, and priority investments. Florida's state-funded local government cybersecurity grant program is one of our most important tools for reaching local communities. Rather than simply issuing direct payments, the Florida Digital Service procures cybersecurity capabilities on behalf of participating governments. That model creates economies of scale, decreases procurement friction, reduces bureaucracy, and gives smaller entities access to enterprise-grade solutions. Through Governor DeSantis' leadership and in partnership with the Florida legislature, the program has been funded at $30 million, $40 million, and $15 million over the past 3 funding cycles. This program provides 7 foundational cyber capabilities across a range of solution providers. The federal, state, and local cybersecurity grant program, or SLCGP, complements Florida's state-funded model by addressing specific needs requested by local entities but are outside the state program. Because of this and the relationships built and help foster through the program, the SLCGP should receive long-term reauthorization. At the same time, reauthorization must promote practical access for communities that need the program most. Higher unstable match requirements can discourage participation, especially among rural and fiscally constrained entities. Reimbursement models can also be difficult for smaller communities that can't carry large upfront costs. Federal grant design should make it easier for the most vulnerable communities to participate. In conclusion, Florida has made meaningful progress under the leadership of Governor DeSantis. We have built a central cybersecurity operations capability, expanded incident response support, strengthened state and local collaboration, improved enterprise visibility, and created grant models that help communities obtain protections they could not acquire alone. However, cybersecurity threats transcend state lines. Continued federal partnership, information sharing, long-term reauthorization of SLCGP will help Florida and other states build a strong, connected defense. Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sponholz. I now recognize Mr. Jane for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chair Ogles, Ranking Member Ramirez, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the cybersecurity threats facing state and local governments and the critical role of the federal government in helping to address them. My name is Samir Jain, and I'm the Vice President of Policy at the Center for Democracy and Technology, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that has worked for more than 3 decades to advance civil rights and civil liberties and to foster and promote a more secure and trustworthy digital ecosystem. State and local governments today are confronting serious cybersecurity threats across nearly every domain in which they operate, from the critical infrastructure that powers our communities and schools, to the systems that administer our elections, to the public benefit programs that millions of Americans rely on. When these systems are compromised, people can lose access to critical resources and services at the moments they need them most. Recent ransomware and other attacks on cities and local governments have shut down a range of systems, from emergency dispatch to departments of motor vehicles to municipal courts. Each of these episodes meant real people were unable to renew a driver's license, to obtain a birth certificate, or otherwise to engage with local services on which they depend. Cyber intrusions can also mean that people's most sensitive information, Social Security numbers, financial data, medical information, information about their children, is exposed to criminal actors and foreign adversaries, leading to risks such as identity theft, financial fraud, harassment, and takeover of email and social media accounts. Just recently, for example, as Chair Ogles mentioned, the breach of the Canvas learning management platform not only disrupted essential learning activities for schools across the country, but exposed sensitive information of over 275 million users, including private messages that may contain deeply personal information. A pernicious knock-on effect of these incidents is the erosion of public trust. When Americans see a county hospital or their child's school district suffer a major breach, their confidence that the government can serve them effectively and protect their personal information necessarily is shaken. That erosion of trust has consequences far beyond any single incident. It can deter people from enrolling in benefits to which they're entitled, from registering to vote, or from engaging with public institutions. These risks are only heightened as artificial intelligence creates new opportunities for malicious actors to attack and exploit government systems at unprecedented speed and scale. The recent announcements of advanced AI systems with substantial cyber capabilities, such as the Mythos preview from Anthropic, have made clear that the offensive cyber landscape is poised to change dramatically, and small and under-resourced jurisdictions are likely to be particularly vulnerable to that change. Previously, the federal government has played an indispensable role in helping state, local, tribal, and territorial governments meet these challenges through the State and Local Government Grant Program, Cybersecurity Grant Program, and through technical assistance from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. State and local officials have received targeted funding, threat intelligence, vulnerability assessments, network monitoring tools, and incident response support. The federal government has unique capabilities that no individual state can match: visibility into foreign threat actors and nation-state campaigns, the ability to detect patterns of cybersecurity activity across jurisdictions, and a hub-and-spoke information sharing architecture anchored by the multi-state and elections infrastructure information sharing and analysis centers, which has allowed real-time warnings, coordinated defense, and rapid response. But just as the threat environment is poised to accelerate at an exceptional rate, the federal government has dramatically pulled back. Over the past year, CISA has lost a third of its workforce. Federal funding for the MS-ISAC was eliminated. Key grant programs have not been funded or been conditioned in ways that effectively block access to cybersecurity support, and long-standing institutional knowledge and relationships have been lost. The result is a widening gap between rapidly escalating threats and the diminished federal capacity to help state and local governments meet them. The federal government should act now to restore the funding, the programs, and the institutional capacity that have made federal-state cybersecurity cooperation work. It should reaffirm the federal government's commitment to information sharing with state and local partners, fund CISA, the ISAC ecosystem, and targeted grant programs, and reestablish the free or low-cost services on which thousands of state and local jurisdictions have come to rely. In short, it should renew the sense of shared responsibility that has defined constructive federal-state cooperation on cybersecurity. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jane. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for their 5 minutes of questions. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. This question would be for Ms. Darby and Mr. Sponholz. The integration of AI into cybersecurity practices is increasingly important as AI-enabled attacks can continue to grow in frequency and sophistication. The National Association for State CIOs and Deloitte recently published a study that found that all but one cybersecurity officer are already using or plan to use generative AI to improve cybersecurity operations. What successes or struggles have you experienced in your state's deployment of AI for cybersecurity, and where do you believe AI can be leveraged to enhance said security? Ms. Darby?
So AI has become an integral part of our operational readiness. The areas that we've seen successes are in reducing the time to react. So the speed of change is most important throughout our environment, and the ability to quickly detect. And so we have seen AI tools allow us to close that response gap in ways that exponentially increase our ability to react and cover endpoints throughout not only state government, but also local government. In addition to areas of challenge, I think workforce continues to be an area of challenge. Just developed talent around using AI tools and understanding how the threat landscape is changing. Things are moving at a very rapid pace. And so continuing to understand that not only the state of Tennessee, but our partners have the right resources with the right knowledge around those tool sets and how to best apply them based on the evolving threat landscape has been one of the areas of challenges that we continue to address.
Yes, ma'am, which underscores why the Pillar Act needs to be passed in the Senate and why, as this committee, will continue to double down on this very issue. Mr. Sponholz.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In Florida, we are looking at AI from a cybersecurity perspective around automation of tasks for cybersecurity operations. So moving intelligence into platforms where we can align with vulnerabilities that are in the ecosystem, with indicators of compromise that show up with our telemetry analysis and our cyber analysis. That is a very resource-intensive work. AI can not only position so we can be more efficient with our resources, but also make it happen much faster and around the clock. So we're excited about that capability around AI. More broadly for AI, we're also ensuring that sensitive data is not being shared outside our systems, and ensure that we have controls in place to be able to prevent that from happening. And also ensuring that we've got the right kind of controls so we have human in the loop, so no AI actions are taken for an agency and an agency action that aren't in control of a human. So we're keeping in mind of those important principles as we explore the different uses and efficiencies around AI.
And my next question would be for any of the witnesses, but I'll start with you, Ms. Darby. Is when I was county executive, we had a cyber attack. We were fortunate that we had already put in place a contingency plan, so we were able to shut down and boot back up. But when you look at cybersecurity going forward, what do we need to do in partnering with states to make sure the small and rural communities like Murray County, when I was executive, aren't left behind because, again, of that staffing and talent issue that you spoke of, ma'am?
So we take the responsibility of protecting all of our local communities very seriously in Tennessee. And one of the areas that I do think is important is participation in the grant program, but also modification of the rules to allow more flexibility. So after I came into this role, a few months in, we had a local community attacked, and they had selected one of the services in the grant program. They needed the other service to respond to what the issue was, and based on the grant rules, we were unable to extend that to them. That type of flexibility to allow us to come to the table with any solution to help the local communities in need in the time of an attack is absolutely essential. So I think that area of flexibility is very critical. Building the relationships with the state IT function, also our National Guard, and then many of our other law enforcement facilities, et cetera, we all have a very coordinated relationship, and a lot of that was brought through the grant program of building those relationships and the connectivity. The ability to extend high-impact, low-touch solutions to those local communities is critical because they do not have the resources that a state would have to be able to protect their communities, but their citizens have the same expectations.
Yes, ma'am. My time is expired, and so we'll come back. I think we'll have time for another round of questions, so we'll start with you when it's my turn again. But I want to recognize the ranking member, the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Ramirez, for her 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Chairman. It's certainly a very important conversation, so I look forward to another round. State and local governments don't just operate some of our most critical infrastructure and provide essential public services. You're also maintaining sensitive data on many of our constituents. When nation-state actors or criminal groups get access to that data, our constituents' privacy is put at risk and in danger. So, Mr. Jain, can you elaborate on the scale of sensitive information state and local governments have on Americans? And I think the second part of that question that I want to make sure we have for the record, why nation states and criminal groups might find accessing that data particularly valuable?
Thank you, Ranking Member Ramirez. Yeah, I mean, states and local governments have some of the most sensitive information about individuals, often even more sensitive than commercial providers have. And crucially, in many cases, this information that people have no choice but to provide to state and local governments to participate in getting benefits or to get critical services. It's not a voluntary relationship necessarily in all cases. And the kind of data we're talking about is everything from medical data to financial data to your social security number to information about children and their health conditions. And that data is, loss of that data can lead to harms from identity theft to financial fraud to impersonation, particularly now, we're talking about AI. The dangers that AI poses are not only that it enables or makes easier intrusions, but it also enables for the use of this data in more pernicious ways. You can more easily draft authentic-sounding phishing emails to conduct fraud and engage in other kinds of impersonation using AI in ways that you couldn't before. And so, all of that is critical. And, foreign actors want that information. Sometimes they're criminal in nature and they want the information just to gain money. Sometimes, particularly some of our adversaries, will want that information for counterintelligence type purposes, particularly if you're talking about individuals who are serving in the military or in the government.
Yeah. So I think I know the end. I think you started actually answering my second question, but I want to make sure that I ask it for the record. Why is it so important that the federal government increase support to state and local governments to better protect our constituents' privacy?
Because right now they face a real asymmetry in terms of the resources and capabilities of the attackers, not only nation-state attackers, but with the advent of AI, the ability of even criminals to have incredibly sophisticated capabilities. And on the other hand, you've got state and local governments that lack a lot of resources and staffing in which the federal government can really help.
And I assume that the other three witnesses would agree you would want to see more federal support for all those reasons. Thank you. But let me just wrap up on a question around election security. Under this administration, CISA has cut its longstanding election security support to state and local election officials. And while Congress has restored funding for CISA's election security programs, the administration does not agree in restoring these funds, and CISA does not intend to be the partner to state and local elections that it has been in the past. So, Mr. Jain, this question's for you, and then I have another question for the rest of the folks here. What is the impact of CISA cutting support for election security?
I think it's quite critical impact for the similar reasons that we're talking about. Election officials, which include, in many cases, just very local jurisdictions that lack a lot of resources or lack staffing, facing attack. Election systems are attractive targets for nation states. And without those kind of security support, the integrity of our elections are potentially at stake. And there's obviously a lot of disagreement around elections and some of the politics around it, but we should all be able to agree that we don't want nation states or other foreign actors interfering in vote counts, voter registration databases, and the like.
Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Jain. So, Ms. Darby, Mr. Ahern, and Mr. Spanholz, what are your states doing to ensure your elections are secure this cycle? I'll start with Ms. Darby.
So the election systems are outside of my scope of responsibility, so I can't speak to that directly.
Mr. Ahern.
The State Board of Elections administers elections. We're a home rule state, so county and New York City administer elections. I'll say a couple of things. Number one, with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Homeland Security, as well as the New York State Police and the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. We run from primary day through election certification, a secure election center in person in multiple locations around the state. We have a deep and long-standing relationship with the Center for Internet Security, which houses both the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, as well as the Elections Information Sharing and Analysis Center. And we're deeply committed to ensuring that the fully auditable paper ballots, which exist in New York State, that people are confident in the election, they're confident in the results, and they're confident.
Thank you. My time is up. If we do that next round, we'll go to you. I appreciate it. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm going in a little different direction, and I don't know who can answer this, but would you say that our adversaries actually have a manpower advantage when it comes to our cyber attacks? That they far outnumber us. Their offensive capability or number of people engaged in this outnumber the number of people we have trying to defend against it. Anybody want to answer that one?
Yes, sir. I think one thing that I think is to your point, sir, the Federal Bureau of Investigation last year indicted approximately 15 members of an organization called iSoon, which is a Chinese private company that was, as alleged in the indictment, used by the Chinese Ministry of State Security to conduct surveillance on dissidents overseas to obtain, economically and militarily important information in the United States. So to your point, sir, they're using their own private sector to amplify the effects of their transnational repression, their economic espionage, and their theft of intellectual property.
And did you say that they have far more people involved in that than we have defending against it?
I think from my perspective, sir, what I could say is that while we work every day 24/7, 365, the rapid amplification and nature of the threat, it's clear that our adversaries are extremely well resourced.
Okay. Well, would you say that, Mr. Sponshold, would you say that I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we're going to have the same, person to person, right, going at each other? That you say there's the advent of artificial intelligence for all offensive purposes, but I also can see that artificial intelligence can be used for defensive purposes and amplify our way to defend ourselves. And I think actually that's the only way we can go, okay, using artificial intelligence in order to combat their artificial intelligence. And I can see a day where we're attacking each other and defending each other 1,000,000 times a second. Where are we on artificial intelligence on the defensive side?
Thank you, sir. This is something that the entire cybersecurity industry, whether it's corporate side or government side, is paying a lot of attention to because there's a large pending threat around that vulnerability assessment and exploit generation that will just happen so much faster than what we're used to. So I know, and speaking with our industry friends, they are working on solutions to be able to incorporate within the solutions we use today, so be able to bake in some additional protections. We are looking at it, as I mentioned earlier, about making it so that we can operate faster, more efficiently, but I think the real answer is collaboration between state, federal, private sector to be able to develop solutions to, like you said, Congressman, fight fire with fire and use AI to be able to defend this nation and the governments within it.
Yeah, because we could hire as many people as we want, okay? But in the end, it has to be automated because I don't see any way around it. And so maybe the role of the federal government is actually to fund the research and the defensive research that we need to automate our defenses against their offensive capabilities, and frankly also develop our own offensive capabilities. Well, I'm sure we have, and that would seem to be the only way that we can combat this and let machines fight each other at the end. In terms of election security. I also believe that there are no systems that are absolutely safe, and that the only way that we can get to verify and have election security that people are confident is that we have some kind of paper ballot, something that you can touch and you can't hack. So there's you bubble it in or whatever, and that at the end you can audit it, and you just have some strange result, you can always go back to that precinct and say, is that the count that you got machine-wise? Does it match up with what you got ballot-wise? In the state of Florida, do we have paper ballots?
I can't confirm or deny that, Congressman. I know the state focuses a bunch of attention through Department of State on non-repudiation, in terms of elections, but I just don't have that information, but I can find out and get it to you, sir.
In the state of New York, you have paper ballots?
Yes, sir.
That's good, excellent. So we need to make sure that all 50 states have paper ballots, and that way it's the only way that we can guarantee, absolutely guarantee, that we have election integrity, because if there ever is a question, you go back to the good old-fashioned paper ballot and count them by hand. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentlewoman from New Jersey, Ms. McIver.
Thank
5
you.
minutes.
Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Local governments hold some of the important information about our constituents, such as healthcare, tax, and criminal history records, but have some of the fewest resources to ensure that this information is secure. Their budgets and personnel are stretched thin. Few local governments entities have enough resources to track, such as an ever-changing threat landscape. This reality can be devastating. Back home in my district, in New Jersey's 10th Congressional District, students at Cranford Public Schools had some of their personal information leaked in a nationwide cyber attack. This was alarming and challenging, but we know it could have been worse. We must act to ensure this does not become a routine part of life. However, this administration has decided to take a step backwards by putting a hiring freeze at CISA at the start of last year and pushing out over 1,000 employees. Trump gutted a key tool in our fight for local cybersecurity. Although the administration appears to have realized the negative impacts of these cuts and started hiring at CISA again, we must continue to demand adequate resources to ensure we are protecting every American's data at every level of government. Under the Trump administration, CISA has lost once again 1,000 staff, or nearly a third of its workforce. These cuts have impacted all its divisions, including the regional offices that provide support to state and local governments. To all the witnesses, I would love for you all if you could elaborate on how important CISA is for cybersecurity, right, and cybersecurity experts on the ground throughout the country to provide support to state and local governments. And also, how have CISA regional staff helped state and local governments strengthen their security and respond to incidents?
Thank you, ma'am. Maybe just a couple of points. Number one, we have a close relationship with our CISA Region 2 staff. We've had the opportunity to meet multiple occasions across administrations with senior CISA leadership. We have a deep partnership with the federal government. As I said in my opening statement, we want and need more of that partnership. And we had in 2022 a very significant cyber attack against Suffolk County, a county on Long Island, and the CISA Region 2 staff, along with the local office of the FBI, along with the Secret Service, along with the state police, along with the Suffolk County Police Department, created a Tiger team to help respond to that event, along with the county executive and his team. So we have real-world experience of working directly in very significant cyber attacks directly with local communities, and that kind of team effort, I think, has given us a very deep appreciation for the importance of the team sport that is cybersecurity.
Thank you. Anyone else care to elaborate? Ms. Darby?
So with CISA, we have seen them as an important partner in providing guidance, services, coordination, and information sharing. We believe the continued collaboration between federal, state, and local is critical because oftentimes, as has been mentioned, the threats and attacks are coming from outside state borders. That being said, in Tennessee, we have certainly seen significant excess with the whole-of-state approach. The combination that we have with local governments, local school systems, in many of our municipalities, being able to work with the state has built a strong awareness of not only the local needs, but what those communities have from a maturity perspective in ways that we can cross that bridge and then use CISA as an organization to help us correlate and understand when threats or attacks are occurring. Is this broader than the state of Tennessee? Is it localized? and they bring that intelligence that helps us connect the dots that are very important at critical times.
Got it. Anyone else care to elaborate in less than a minute?
I'll just echo Chief Darby. That's exactly right. Just like the Florida CISA serves as a clearinghouse for threat information, CISA does something similar. There's nobody really else positioned to do that. So it's an important role and something we depend on. Thank you.
Got it.
I would just add, along with CISA and CISA support coordination with the MS-ISAC and the ability to share information, to also provide monitoring tools and sensors and those kinds of tools to, particularly to local jurisdictions that otherwise wouldn't have the resources to deploy those.
Thank you. Thank you so much for each of your expertise. With that, I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Information flow is critical when you're talking about cybersecurity, cyber threat, cyber risk. You have the federal government, which moves at a snail's pace, and anything that we can either move through committee or appropriate most likely land a few years later. Some of the challenges that I see, we only have 3 states. Sorry, sir, I don't know where you're from, I apologize. Unless you're somewhere over there not, I'm just gonna go with 3, okay? We have 3 states that have these issues. In all of your opening statements, those issues were different. Similar, but they varied left or right. And we have to wade through the weeds at any given level to say, okay, which one's right, which one's the most important, and which ones are we going to address? Now, attacks happen at the federal level from nation-state actors, from local mom and pop shops down the street, and they happen to you too. The problem is, when they happen to you, oftentimes that's not communicated to us, and the reciprocal of that is when it happens here, it's not communicated to you. Now we have CISA. Mr. Hearn, you mentioned the Department of Energy. I don't know if Ms. Darby or Mr. Spallhouse, does the state touch the Department of Energy in any way? I didn't hear you say that, and I don't know. It's remarkable how valuable of an asset the Department of Energy is when it comes to the protection of the metaverse above us, but some states do not. My concern is how do we corral the states, all of them, subject matter experts like yourself, to address us, to give us, so we, the grant profile, I understand, CISA, very important. And I don't know if I can speak for the entire committee, but we're behind that, or at least I am. How about that? At least I am. Because I see the ones and the zeros, and I see the problem set that is scaling itself in a way that we can't control. And I would personally love to give you everything that you need, but I have 3 sitting in front of me that ask different things, and if I had to have the rest of the states to come in and ask, just think of that and how challenging that is for us. Because if you can just convince the 5 of us that are in here today right now, we have to convince everyone else to get on board with that too. But it's very challenging if there's so much. Do your counterparts, short of the 3 sitting here, collectively come together to give that to us? Or can you, or will you? Ms. Darby, you can start it off, ladies first. I don't know why there's not somebody from Texas sitting on that role, but Tennessee, we can work with that.
Well, thank you for that. So I think there is, so I'll speak first for the state CISOs. I know that there is a strong network where they have channels where they are connected on a daily basis around emerging threats. They don't wait for an administrative agency or to be told about things. There is certainly that informal information sharing going on in a way that we're all Americans and we're going to make sure we're all protected regardless of state borders. And we recognize that those threats don't necessarily follow certain judicial jurisdictions, excuse me. And so with that, I think the relationships and coordinations that happen informally are often more timely and more valuable. It's not to say we don't need the other coordination, because everyone has more formalized areas of information gathering that's being provided, but those informal networks that have already formed through the opportunities for collaboration across, whether it's chief information officers or CISOs, has been extremely valuable.
How about this? If I was to ask the 4 of you, how do we fix this problem right now? Would the response you're going to give me would be money?
I think,
Because
sir,
you ask for it every, I'm not wire brushing you, please, but that's what we ask for every year, and every year this problem gets worse.
I think, sir, there's two challenges that the committee has recognized that I think we see at the state level as well. One is the shrinking of CISA's capability, attenuating the operational coordination that we undertake through both formal mechanisms like the state fusion centers. Ours is called the New York State Intelligence Center, based in East Greenbush, New York. There are 50 analogies around this country. They have representatives from the FBI, the Secret Service, the alphabet soup. And so we, obviously ensuring that CISA is, authorized and resourced to continue to conduct that mission.
So I have 7 seconds, and I apologize, Mr. Chairman, but if every state went directly to CISA, and CISA was one sitting in front of us saying this is exactly what every single state needs, that might be a profound leap in the right direction. Does that even remotely sound like a good idea? I guess not.
Thank you, Mr.
Is that
Chair.
okay, Mr. Chairman? All right, thank you.
You question about how do we get consensus? How do we really understand the problem, 50 states? I would leverage some of the great communities we have, like through NASCIO, the National Association of State CIOs. There's great communities of practice within NASCIO, including the CISO community. So to be able to get somebody working like from CISA with NASCIO to help form some consensus on direction, I think may be a path forward.
Do you see how wide this net is being cast just in the conversation that we're having right now? I mean, again, and I don't know the best way to answer it. You're the subject matter experts, but you just threw another acronym and an institution at me that I have never even heard of. And we have to wade through that in order to give either appropriated or regulated, correct? Thank you. I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell, yields back. I go to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw.
Thank you, Chairman Ogles and Ranking Member Ramirez, for convening today's hearing and for our witnesses for joining us. As we've heard, at the very moment that state and local governments face more frequent and more sophisticated cyber threats, the federal government is pulling back and leaving them more and more to fend for themselves. CISA has lost a third of its workforce. I represent many of those third who have lost their jobs. Key programs have been eliminated or defunded. As we've heard from our witnesses, funding for the multi-state and elections infrastructure ISACs have been eliminated. The state and local cybersecurity grant program has yet to be reauthorized, although there's strong support here to do that. But if you look at what has happened over the course of this administration, we've been lowering our defenses as a nation while our adversaries are getting more aggressive. Cyber attacks against state and local governments up 50%. Iranian hackers targeting small water utilities. In March of this year, an Iran-backed hacker caused global disruption at a major medical device manufacturer. Recently, as we all know, the education platform Canvas, attacked by a hacking group, gained access to millions of users' data, including students, teachers, and staff. The attacks are growing in quantity and sophistication, and the consequences are stacking up. And to me, I think it makes one thing unmistakably clear: state and local governments and critical infrastructure operators need strong, steady federal support and partnership. And instead, we've seen the Trump administration walking away, abandoning these communities who are on the front lines of the threats. And I just want to ask about some of that. When CISA cut support for the MS-ISAC, they said there would be a, quote, new model. Mr. Ahern, can you talk us through what that new model is that CISA developed when they eliminated support for the MS-ISAC?
I have not been made aware of that new model, sir.
There isn't a new model. The new model is governments that want to participate can pay to participate. They offered no new services or new structure, became a payment-based model. And Mr. Jain, just under that new model, there's a risk that some jurisdictions maybe lose access. Maybe they can't afford to. They have a tough budget year. I've been in local government, happened to be in one that would have the resources in most years to pay whatever the fee might be, but those jurisdictions that might not have the resources to pay the fee to participate, do you say they're more likely to be in urban areas or rural areas?
You know, I think it may vary, I think rural areas in particular, but I mean, what's particularly unfortunate about that is it's the jurisdictions that most need the help that are least likely to be able to afford.
Smaller jurisdictions.
Right, the smaller jurisdiction, because if they don't have the resources and the money to join the ISAC, they probably also don't have the resources and the money to, to buy equipment, to buy network monitoring tools, to have cybersecurity staff. So in some ways, it's the ones who need it the most are the least likely to be able to get it as a result of that model.
Mr. Ahern, in March of 2025, the administration said that the Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Council no longer met department priorities. Can you just talk us through in 1 minute what that was and what capability or capacity is lost with the elimination of that council?
Yes, sir. In short, the Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Council was a formal collaborative environment between state, local government, and the private sector. And we believe, as part of this effort, we should reestablish that body. We should bring in the cloud and other service providers on which state and local governments so dearly depend, because those environments and that partnership framework is critical for ensuring that we have a continuous and accurate representation of the risk that these providers place to our government.
Thank you. And I just, I really appreciated Mr. Luttrell's line of questioning and his concern that sometimes everything sounds like it's going to cost money, cost money, cost money. I would submit to my colleagues that one of the most cost-effective things we can do at the federal government level is play that convening role. There is no other entity that can as effectively bring together governments, the private sector, experts to share information and develop solutions together. I think that's a really, really good bang for our buck, and we're losing something with the elimination of that. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. I recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Lillotta.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with the gentleman from Virginia. We should do more about that. Mr. Ahern, how you doing?
Good to see you again, sir.
You're from New York?
Yes, sir.
And in 2022, you were appointed New York's first cybersecurity officer.
Yes, sir.
And you were recently promoted to the Director of Security Intelligence in the Governor's Office.
Yes, sir.
So you're in charge of cybersecurity in the great state of New York.
That's correct.
Mr. Ahern, is cybersecurity important to Governor Hochul?
Yes, sir. I think Governor Hochul has proven, both with our deep partnership with the legislature and the longstanding relationships we've established across the federal government, that we take cybersecurity and cyber resilience very seriously.
And demonstrating that importance, she gave you a budget of about $90 million?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Earlier, you mentioned a ransomware attack in my county, Suffolk County, in 2022. I want to say thanks for mentioning that. Do you know about, and if you don't know specifically, no harm, but do you know about how many ransomware incidents were reported in New York State in 2025?
The numbers that I have is that the total complaint volume, according at least to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, was approximately 45,255.
You're very well prepared, sir. Thank you. The one that happened in the town of Southold, a town in the North Fork of Long Island, in my district. I don't know if you remember this. In November of 2025, it was the week of Thanksgiving. They had an attack. The attackers wanted about $600,000 in cryptocurrency. They froze the town's email, payroll, tax collection, building permits, decades of records. It took us weeks, if not months, to get everything back online. We rightfully didn't pay the ransom. It took us about $500,000 to rebuild the system. And it was a tough event for us, and we wanted more help, and we could have a conversation offline about more the state and feds could have done for us there. But back to some other issues. Governor Hochul, she's your boss?
That's correct, sir.
You testified a few moments ago that cybersecurity is important to your boss?
That's correct, sir.
So important that she dedicated about $90 million to the state's cybersecurity efforts, including the things that have happened in my county with Suffolk County, in my town of Southold?
That's correct, sir.
So is protecting New Yorkers from cybersecurity threats more or less important to Governor Hochul than the migrants who are in our country, in our state illegally?
Well, sir, I think that the issue of public safety is deeply important, and while we're here to talk today about the importance of cybersecurity, we don't believe that these are mutually exclusive concerns.
Okay. So the question is cybersecurity more or less important to Governor Hochul than the migrants in New York State? Do you have an answer for that?
Sir, I think what is important is emphasizing the deep partnership we have with the private
It's okay.
sector.
I'll take it as a no answer. That's fine. Chairman, I want to submit into the record with unanimous consent from the New York State Comptroller's website a report that Governor Hochul is spending $4.3 billion on migrants, hotels, healthcare, and lawyers. So she's spending $4.3 billion on the migrants, and she's spending $90 million on Social Security. We enumerated at least 2 incidents in my district that are important to my law-abiding citizen constituents who pay a lot of taxes. You pay taxes, sir?
I do, sir.
Pay state taxes?
Yes, sir.
Do you know that we have the worst state tax climate in the entire nation?
Sir, I think that,
Just a yes or no. Do you know that New York is dead last?
I did not know that, sir.
Okay,
no.
unfortunately, it happens to be true. And yet, despite this issue, and we're here talking about important issues, the gentleman from Virginia makes a good point that we should all be doing more, and you're here to ask for more money. The challenge that we have here is that your governor is spending 48 times more on the migrants than we're spending on cybersecurity to protect law-abiding citizens. Is that an issue for you?
Sir, I think that the issue of cybersecurity is deeply important. I think the issue of public safety is absolutely essential, but we don't believe that these are either mutually exclusive concerns or should be set in opposition to each other.
Sure, but our budgets are reflective of priorities. Plenty of politicians that have said that. Our budgets are our priorities. But when you're spending 48 times more on the migrants than you're spending on protecting law-abiding New Yorkers, that's an issue. Have you read recently about the governor giving Mayor Mondami $4 billion to bail out his state budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you know the mayor wants to have free buses and government-run grocery stores and all this other nice socialist stuff in New York City. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of the comments about the mayor's priorities, yes, sir.
Okay. So 40 times more towards New York City's government-run grocery stores and the free buses and all the other socialist wish list, 40 times more money to that than to cybersecurity. So I'll ask you, what's more important to Governor Hochul, Mondami's socialist agenda or protecting New Yorkers from the next cybersecurity attack?
I think, number one, sir, that the issue of cybersecurity and the resilience of our infrastructure.
40 times more money to one thing than the other. Is socialism more important to Governor Hochul than protecting New Yorkers from the next cyber attack?
The issue
40
of
times more money.
public safety,
40
sir,
times the amount of money here than over here. Which is more important?
the issue of public safety is deeply important to our communities, and the
Chairman, I yield back.
cybersecurity of our communities is essential.
Gentleman yields back. So we'll have time for additional questions, and so I'll pick up kind of where we left off, and just kind of to summarize, duly noted, really from everyone, but specifically Ms. Darby, Mr. Jane, about the lower match, in particular for the rural, poorer communities, grant flexibility, a response fund, and like a zero-day type apparatus. But picking up with you, Mr. Hearn, when you look at rural communities, small communities, how do we specifically address them not being left behind?
I think, number one, sir, it's the shared services that each one of our panelists have commented on. As you know, my colleagues from both Tennessee and Florida have mentioned, the ability of using whole-of-state cybersecurity shared services to make sure that we can substantially mitigate both the cost and the complexity of deploying these tools is essential. One of the things I think that we've all found is through the grant program's current structure, it is harder to do that, and we should make that easier. I think the comments from then gentlewoman from Tennessee are very important in considering how that might be done. We share those concerns. And number two, we found that by engaging in statewide contracting, we're able to bring down the cost of those services. And one example is we saved county and local governments $19 million on one part of our shared services. And just recently, by going with a whole-of-state grant program, much like my colleagues, we're able to bring down the cost of multi-factor tokens by approximately 21%. and that wouldn't be possible for a county or a local government in some cases to cover that match requirement. So because we could lower the cost, we ended up being able to cover the cost share requirement as a state within the state budget. And so that could, enable us to cover even more entities that would not be able to participate before.
Well, and on that note, as my colleague from New York, obviously very passionate about the budget, is, making sure that states are actually paying their fair share. And so you have a large state like New York that is, the states set their priorities, right? Obviously, cybersecurity is an important issue. And so as we go, that's really the challenge we face is, I'm sensitive to the small rural community aspect because that's where I was a county executive and we experienced a cyber attack and we have a very forward-thinking leader, quite frankly, on cybersecurity in Tennessee and Bistarby. But then we've got to figure out a way that we're helping the rural communities without propping up some of the big cities. And so that's the challenge we face today as we go forward. And so to you, sir, Mr. Sponholz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Completely agree. Our strategy in Florida has been to focus on the rural communities and the fiscally constrained communities, whether that be the state program or the federal program. Definitely prioritize them as well as our critical infrastructure assets throughout the state, recognizing that they have difficulties being able to buy some of those kind of solutions that are critical to protect their information systems. And I'll just add on what Mr. Ahern was talking about in that not just driving down the cost, but a lot of times some of these solutions, the rural and smaller communities are too small to even be able to purchase some of these solutions, right? So some of these solutions expect larger implementations and larger sales, and unless it's done through some larger purchasing mechanism, they won't even work with some of these smaller communities. So multiple benefits. We've seen tremendous savings through bulk purchasing, 4-to-1 savings last year, which was just something that was really amazing for the state to be able to cover more local entities through our grant programs.
Mr. Jane?
I think I would add, in addition to money, a lot of these jurisdictions lack staffing, lack the expertise and staffing. Now, part of that is not having the money to hire people, but it also means this is where CISA can really make a difference in terms of being able to provide expertise to the local and rural jurisdictions to do things like conduct penetration testing and identify particular vulnerabilities that their systems may face. And so I think this is a place where, CISA, where having the ability to join the ISAC without having to pay for it and to gain the benefit of that kind of intelligence and threat sharing is also critical.
All right. What we'll do is I'll yield back. I'd like to recognize the ranking member, Ms. Ramirez, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to just respond for a moment regarding budgets being moral documents. I couldn't agree more. Budgets are moral documents. And spending $1 billion on a ballroom, which is what the president wants, or $1.7 billion to incentivize insurrectionists, while we still are waiting for the reauthorization of this critical grant program, says a lot about where priorities are right now with this administration. I just want to make sure for the record that we state that. While it's really easy to start blaming immigrants for everything, I think that at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, those of us that are actually prioritizing and have the influence over budgets, prioritizing ballrooms and incentivizing insurrectionists, while cybersecurity is not being funded at the levels necessary, says a lot about where our leadership is. With that, I want to come back to the conversation here. Rapid advances in frontier AI models are reshaping the cybersecurity landscape. We've heard from your own testimony today what is happening and the threats and the impact that your own respective states are having. For many state and local governments with limited resources, this creates many new challenges to defending your networks. Mr. Jane, what are potential risks frontier AI models pose to state and local governments and their constituents?
I think there are several different types of threats. One is that, we've seen with Mythos, the Anthropic model, and OpenAI's most recent model, that they're able to discover vulnerabilities, sometimes vulnerabilities that have been embedded in systems for years without discovery. And if those kinds of capabilities get in the hands of other nation states or criminal actors, then they can identify vulnerabilities in state and local systems perhaps more quickly than those jurisdictions are able to patch them or to address them. And so there are more vulnerabilities that could be exploited and can be exploited much more quickly than has happened in the past. Two, as state and local governments understandably and rightly use AI for more services, provide chatbots through which constituents can interact with governments, and use AI to help their own coding their own systems, that use of AI itself introduces new vulnerabilities because those AI systems have access to data about people, and they themselves then become a potential conduit for potential attacks. And then the third point I'd make, which I mentioned earlier, is that AI also allows for more efficient and more damaging exploitation of the data that does get taken in a breach. So it becomes much easier to draft, very authentic phishing emails or to impersonate people using AI, generative AI to create those things. And so it makes the consequences and the harms of the breaches even worse when the bad actors have AI.
Yeah. So my last question comes back to Mr. Ahern. What does your state need from the federal government and from AI model developers to better secure your networks?
I think number one, we want the reauthorization of this grant program. As has been said before, we think it should be more straightforward to use them for shared services. Number two, we think that the cuts to CISA should be reversed. We think that some of the important convening mechanisms, as the representative said, are deeply important, and there isn't another secret team that can do that convening. The Office of the National Cyber Director, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, and the federal government is the essential partner in ensuring that we remain united against these threats.
Thank you. So I heard you say the reauthorization of the grant program, that the cuts to CISA be reversed, and that we be the ones that are convening public and private partners to ensure that cybersecurity is top priority for us. Thank you. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry Mr. Lalotta left, but Mr. Ahern, during Governor Hochul's tenure, has the budget in New York for cybersecurity gone up or down?
Up.
Okay. Do you know what CISA's budget was in FY 2025?
I do not, sir.
Okay, it was $3 billion. Do you know, or any of our panelists know, what President Trump requested in his budget for CISA in fiscal year 2027? $2 billion. So we are looking at a cut in a one-third cut in federal funding for cybersecurity. And as the ranking member noted, if President Trump gets his way, in all ways, we'd be spending $1 billion for the ballroom, $1.8 billion for the January 6th slush fund, $2.8 billion just on those two items, $800 million more than his total commitment to cybersecurity. I'm sure Mr. Lalotta knows those numbers as well. I did want to ask all of you, I think one of the challenges we have in this conversation is how do you measure success? And it's certainly a challenge we've had in federal agencies. And typically the numbers we hear, we've heard some of it today, the number of attacks has increased, right? As 50,000 attacks in New York or millions and millions of attacks. I don't know if that's a useful number other than to help us understand that the scope of the challenge is significant. But I'm interested for each of you in your respective states, Ms. Darby and Mr. Ahern, Mr. Sponholz perhaps. How do you measure success? How do you determine whether your cybersecurity posture, set aside the attacks that come in maybe out of your control, but how do you measure whether your posture is stronger today than it was yesterday? Maybe we'll start with Ms. Darby.
Thank you for the question. So in Tennessee, we have specific outcomes around every measure. So it's number of endpoints protected, It is cybersecurity training, and is that reducing, whether it's phishing attacks and resulting attacks as a result of that. So we have specific outcomes where we focus on each of those. One of the other areas that I would just offer in reflection of what's been discussed here today is we've all expressed our desire for the grant program to be renewed and believe it has provided significant value, but it was designed 4 to 5 years ago, and the climate has transitioned and changed. I do believe scarcity often ignites innovation, and using this as an opportunity that if the grant program is renewed, do we look at different ways to identify what those outcome measures are that you're asking about, but also look at, for a central convening organization, I think it also provides an opportunity to bring together national experts in ways that can help all the states leapfrog the capabilities that AI has introduced. We are all trying to figure out how to pivot traditional operations to future, and there's a real opportunity here to do things differently.
Thank you. Mr. Ahern, metrics of success for you all?
Yeah, I think number one is we know that bad things are going to happen. There's adversaries on the other side of the world, on the other side of the keyboard. But number one from us is the time from detection to confirmed remediation. And just one statistic we shared in our testimony, with the state's shared services program, when you're within the state's program, it is 37 minutes from detection to confirmed remediation on average. Whereas without that shared services enabled in part by this grant program, it is 2,880 minutes or 2 full days. And that's the difference between using automation, cloud-delivered services, 24/7 Security Operations Center to...
Obviously, the attacker can do a lot more damage in that much longer time period. Yeah, okay. Mr. Sponholz.
Yes, thank you for the question. So just briefly, a couple ways beyond what's been discussed already is being able to measure the impact of an incident where we have protections, right? So we expect that where we have better protections, better solutions, better training, we're going to have reduced impact and effects to the organization. A little bit easier to measure, well, excuse me, a little bit more difficult to measure, but something that's important to see how well our controls are working. And then secondly is time to provide contextualized information to locals and state agency partners. So if we find something, getting that information to them as quickly as possible with good context on what the problem is, why it matters to them, and how they need to remediate.
Thank you. If the chairman will allow, Mr. Jain, if you have any thoughts on that?
The only other thing I'd add is another measure of success is really to what degree are constituents being harmed or not harmed in terms of are they suffering identity theft or some of the harms that can come from theft of personal information, to what degree are critical services offline and not available to them over the course as a result of a cyber attack. So I think looking at it from the point of view of constituents and consumers and what harms they are or aren't suffering and minimizing those is really an important measure of success.
Okay. Thank you. Yield back.
You know, John Quincy Adams loved the House of Representatives because it's where you argue and debate. And so we can argue about the numbers. You know, the House appropriation for CISA's FY27 is $2.5 billion. There's an $185.8 billion cut over this 26 fiscal year. There is a 5.1 million specification there for additional security advisors and specifies 53 personnel in particular. So that being said, to the idea of scarcity. So we're seeing cuts, and we can agree or disagree whether that's a productive thing. But we also know the government can't do this alone, that we need to have integration with the private sector and some of these NGOs that dabble, if you will, or pioneer in AI. And so as you look at coordination and collaboration, as you look at response time, Mr. Ahern, if we sat down at a table and setting everything else aside, CISA, whatever other alphabet agency that might be there, and we were to create a construct of how do we make sure that that breach in New York or Florida or Virginia is instantly known in Tennessee or vice versa. Because seconds, it's kind of like a 911 call, you know, where a minute matters. And I would think arguably in this space, in this environment, because it is so rapid and the data is so portable, that seconds matter. So how do we fix it? So I think, because of the amount of time we have left, I think this is an opportunity to, and obviously we'll be respectful of one another's times and such, but to create more of this back and forth roundtable approach of like, how do we fix this? Because we know it's a problem, and we can't just throw money at it if we don't have all the partners at the table. So we've picked on you, Ms. Darby. You've had to lead off every time. So why don't we go at this end of the table, and we'll go that direction. So Mr. Jane.
Sure. So, I think this is where constructs like the ISACs are really important in terms of being more of a hub and spoke kind of a model, because you're right that you need the information sharing really flowing in both directions, in three directions, from states. You have states, private sector, and you have the federal government. And you need information flowing bidirectionally from both. In other words, when one state suffers an attack, communicating that to the hub so that other states become aware of it and can become alert to the possibility that they're going to suffer the same kind of attack. So that kind of bidirectional information sharing. Obviously, the private sector has insights and information that the governments are not. They're going to see things that the government's not. And the federal government has unique visibility into things like nation-state campaigns. What are their objectives? What are they trying to accomplish? So I think you're certainly right that you need the private sector at the table as well in that, but I do think then you need a hub or a place or a mechanism for that information both to get ingested and then propagated back out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we have the technology today, so we have great tools and solutions to be able to do rapid intelligence sharing. I believe it's a matter of priority to some degree to be able to focus in on that mission and do it well. Mentioned before about our communities of practice, such as the ones that exist in the National Association of State CIOs, to be able to generate support for that kind of information sharing. I think that would be a great path to be able to get a coalition of states across the nation to participate in information sharing. And I just believe that information sharing is one of the most critical things we can do to stay ahead of some of the threats we face today. And I'll just close with this question. As far as some sort of federal guidance around working with our commercial partners to figure out what's the solution to some of these pending AI threats that are around the corner for us is critically important. And I don't know who else is doing that if it's not going to be the federal government. So it's important that they stay in that fight. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just a couple of other thoughts, I think, from the great panelists here. Number one, I think, authorities, appropriations, and capabilities. Authorities, we have the CISA 2015 Information Sharing Act, which has received bipartisan support, is also expiring relatively soon and should be reauthorized. That's one of the fundamental mechanisms that enables information sharing from the private sector to the federal government. Appropriations, sir, as you mentioned, appropriations are a part of this, but the capabilities that we have at the state level, at the federal government level, and within the private sector, I think we want to be even more pointed about using the state fusion centers, which are already situated at the intersection between the private sector, the federal agencies, and the state and local governments. And those capabilities moving beyond just throwing emails over the wall, but into operational collaboration that I think, unfortunately, we tend only to see when there are gray skies or black skies, but we want to extend that operational coordination, that capability development across the operational spectrum, and that'll only happen with all of these elements in place. But sir, I think that as we've seen in New York, it is possible to do that, and we are eager to partner with the federal government and the private sector in that effort.
Ms. Darby?
So Tennessee, I think, has remarkable cybersecurity maturity and has done well in this particular positioning. But I do think the environment that we are in right now has created new dynamics that are significant and material, and would challenge that. When we think of kinetic situations, the federal government has large tentacles and intelligence that start to lead and allow reactions. In the cybersecurity area, it feels like oftentimes we're getting intelligence after things have occurred versus proactively. And so maybe it's what comes to mind is just a think tank of national experts that are positioning the states to be able to leapfrog their level of expertise around this changing dynamic. States often struggle with attracting the best talent. I'm sure the federal government has a common issue. Part of this grant program redesign perhaps is a way to create an opportunity for an innovations group that attracts the nation's best leaders that will allow us to understand how do we start to understand that these models are going to be democratized with access, that it is no longer just nation state leaders we have to be concerned about. It is local, very intelligent, maybe individuals that are focused on doing harm that now have access to these tools, and they can scale in ways and speed that were not present in the past.
So, if I may, if a ransomware attack were to shut down a major healthcare system in Tennessee tomorrow, disabling electronic health record systems, medical devices, communication systems, et cetera, billing, et cetera, and respectively to each of your states, whether it's healthcare or water infrastructure, et cetera, walk us through, and I think it's important, the reason why I posed this question is for those watching, the community at large, to understand on the record that what's at stake. So when you talk about the Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon attacks, the pre-positioning of software and critical infrastructure that essentially with the flip of a switch could be turned on or off. What happens in that moment, and then what are the repercussions, especially with, Tennessee's Music City, USA, but it's also considered by many as Healthcare USA because of Nashville. Ms. Darby?
So in that particular situation, we would certainly work with the appropriate individuals at the hospital to be able to understand the situation, offer resources immediately, which would certainly include the state cybersecurity resources, but also the connection with our law enforcement agencies, TBI being one of our most prominent partners that is very responsive to ensure that we are doing everything we can to make sure the threat is isolated and then mitigating any further damage. With that, we would then focus on investigation and recovery with them. The hospitals also are well prepared for those types of scenarios to be able to ensure patient safety and mitigation, and we would support those efforts from a state perspective in any way that is necessary.
And to the rest of the panelists, do you have, whether it's a hypothetical situation, but moreover, do you have a real-world example of what happened in, say, New York, where you had some sort of critical infrastructure situation, there was a response, but what did that mean for the community at large?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, sir. And I think, we had One Brooklyn Health, which is a hospital system in Brooklyn, which serves primarily underserved communities in that, in that area. And it means going on diversion, as everyone is aware, telehealth, radiology delivered over the internet, stroke, emergency rooms, those are all things that run on computers. I would note that New York is, to our knowledge, the only state that has enforceable minimum standards for hospitals, what we call Article 28 facilities. In November of 2023, the governor directed the Department of Health to not only enforce minimum standards, which we think are important, like multi-factor authentication, like hardening, but also having paper plans for going on diversion so that we can minimize the impact to our communities when these unfortunate incidents do occur. And so we have a reporting regime through the Department of Health, through the New York State Local Health Administrators Association, and with our federal partners to ensure that we understand the ramifications, especially for our rural hospitals who might be one of the only emergency rooms within a 30-mile radius. So we have developed plans with our Office of Fire Prevention Services and others to make sure that we can allocate the appropriate emergency resources when these incidents do occur. Because as you said, sir, these incidents are unfortunately picking up in pace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So continuing with the hospital scenario, so we did have a fairly recent incident with the hospital, and we work closely with the Agency for Healthcare Administration, which is a Florida agency that helps administer and oversees hospital operations throughout the state and care centers throughout the state. They have a good handle on the communication channels that exist between the state, other hospitals, so we work closely with them to ensure Chief Darby said isolation happens so that things don't continue to spread across the healthcare system, which is very important. And Mr. Chair, you mentioned about the impacts to the communities and the people who use these services. So when a ransomware attack happens, you're also breached at the same time. You can count on that. And the terrible thing about that is that information is not just used as leverage for some sort of payout, but it's also used in subsequent attacks. So they use that information to be able to do fraud against people and affecting their lives. They use that to try to break into other people's accounts, and they use that just to formulate enough information to build future attacks. So not only does it have the immediate effect of breaking operations, it has the longer effect of impacting people's lives and the further impact of setting up tomorrow's attack. So something that is just another example and reason why the investment and the attention to cybersecurity protections is so imperative.
Mr. Jane?
Fortunately, I'm not in a position of having to respond to those kinds of attacks. But, you know, I think picking up on the point that Ms. Darby made earlier about innovation, I think, you know, we've talked a little bit about the use of AI in defense in terms of preventing attacks, but I think AI also has a potential for helping with incident response itself and being able to process data, being able to figure out how to respond more quickly. And, you know, we have the AI labs who have a lot of expertise in terms of how to use their systems. And I think, you know, we're talking about, you know, Glasswing and these collaborations that the AI labs are doing in terms of cybersecurity. I think turning a little bit of that to incident response would be useful as well.
So as we start to close out the hearing, what I would love to get, one from you in writing so you can have time to think about it, would be just sort of a best practices that you might recommend. As we've said, we've passed the Pillar Act here in the House, which authorizes it, the grant program through fiscal year 33. We're waiting on action in the Senate. So as we go forward, there may be the opportunity to make some revisions, and if no, we can have another piece of legislation that really perhaps, as Ms. Darby, I do believe you said, gives that flexibility as you're trying to help, say, Murray County with the grant program sort of thing. So I would love to get those. So we can compile kind of what are the next steps, because I fear this will be an ongoing conversation where every so often we're having to revisit this type of how do we respond to that next level attack. Because when you look at like Chat or Grok a year and a half ago, that was a search engine on steroids, right? Now you have these agents that are almost thinking, if you will, at least from a computer standpoint, but they're very dynamic. And so what does 18 months look from now? Or 6 months from now. So we'll start with you, Mr. Jane. Ms. Darby, I'll give you the final word. But what are your closing thoughts? Anything that you want to reiterate? I understand that we need to address CISA, make some revisions there, but I like the idea of scarcity because we're trying to get the private and the nonprofit sector involved in this conversation because government is not the 100% solution. It's got to be this coordinated effort. Mr. Jane?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree that it needs to be a coordinated effort among all stakeholders. And, you know, part of the private sector now that needs to be more involved, I think, is not just the cybersecurity companies, but the AI companies themselves, because they're bringing to the table these new capabilities, both offensive but defensive, I think potentially defensive as well. So I agree with that. You know, beyond that, I think, you know, resources aren't going to be enough, but you do, I mean, the resources are sort of a base level that you need in order to be able to deal with cybersecurity, because without those resources, particularly when we're talking about the smaller jurisdictions or those without the staffing or the budgets, if they don't have that minimally, it really doesn't matter what you have in the way of capabilities because they're not going to be able to utilize them.
Well, to that point, I won't say his last name, but Bill, who was my IT director, he was also the guy that was plugging in your keyboard and changing out the monitors and resetting passwords and, building the network for the county and helping the hospital. But he was also the guy that would have to defend the county and the hospital and the school system in coordination with the school's resources from a cyber attack, right? And so you had 1.5 individuals having to defend a county and a community from perhaps a nation-state actor, or today from an agent, an AI agent. So I do know we have another member coming, but we'll go ahead and up to you, Mr. Sponholz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'd say a couple things. One is to continue on with leadership around exploring solutions to the coming threats around AI and vulnerability development with commercial AI companies, as mentioned, as well as with the federal government, just taking the lead there. Secondly, I'd say in respect to the federal grant, as much flexibility as possible would be well used, just because every state's different. So different needs, different ways that state's going to be able to execute with that money. And those kind of things are really hard to dictate or to specify at a federal level. But if states are given the freedom and flexibility to be able to tailor how that money is used within their respective states to as much as possible, I think you'll get a more efficient use of those funds and more protection for every dollar with that flexibility.
When you look at the grant program and the deployment of AI agents, is there enough flexibility in there for the training for your staff or future staff? Because I've had the privilege or misfortune of being able to use jailbroken AI. And the prompts that I was able to put in and get a very detailed answer on are horrifying, to include how to construct a weapon of mass destruction, a bomb, from hardware supplies, what was the ideal vehicle to put it in, what would be the blast radius, so as to not be injured myself, how to build a remote detonator from off-the-shelf items. And so people need to understand that this is coming down the pike. And when you have countries like China, whereas we try to have guardrails here in the US, you have a threat actor, a nation state, that isn't as concerned with safety. So when you go back to the Cold War, we had this arms race with Russia, and it was about who had the most nuclear weapons. Well, there came a point of mutual destruction where we could all blow up the world many times over. So then it became about delivery systems and who could do it the fastest. But is it 8 minutes, 10 minutes, or 12 minutes? It's still just minutes. With AI, this horizon doesn't exist. And the speed at which the capabilities are accelerating is almost unfathomable. And even then, though, it was between two nation states. Now you can have some knucklehead in a basement somewhere, if they get the right technology, can do this. And so I want to make sure as we move forward in that next piece of legislation, as we're looking to defend states and communities from this type of threat, that we're actually equipping you with the tools that are going to be helpful. So as we go forward, I'll give each of you my number to stay in touch, to make sure that as we apply some sort of grant or pool or resource available to the states, that it's actually in real time, like in the labs of deployment, which would be the states, that it's effective. So I will pause there and recognize the gentleman. You ready? Or do you need a moment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fong from California, 5 minutes.
Without objection, I'm entering into the record a letter from the Operational Technology Cybersecurity Coalition, the Alliance for Digital Innovation, the Cybersecurity Coalition, and the Information Technology Industry Council, dated May 20th, 2026. This letter urges continued support for the state and local cybersecurity grant program and highlights the need for continued cooperation by federal entities with state and local governments. Apologize for being a little late. Transportation markup is still going, but earlier this year, I hosted a roundtable along with Chairman Garbarino in my district, where we discuss the importance of current and future cybersecurity challenges facing the Central Valley and across California. I have a lot of rural communities, military installations, and so the soft targets around those installations, such as water, power, healthcare infrastructure, remains a top priority. Within your state's critical infrastructure sectors, how have you all worked to update these cybersecurity capabilities, especially with what's going on with Mythos and everything else? And I apologize if it's repeating, but I'd like to get your perspective.
Yes, sir, I'll start. I think number one, in 2022, Governor Hochul signed first in the nation legislation giving our Public Service Commission the authority to regulate cyber hazards on par with other hazards. That resulted in rulemaking, which we believe has materially advanced the cybersecurity posture of electrical distribution utilities. Number two, in 2023, as I mentioned previously, our Department of Health enacted first in the nation cybersecurity standards, along with a significant grant program to update the technology posture of hospitals in the state, in particular rural hospitals, which as I think we all understand are particularly important targets for our communities. And number three, actually just last month, our Department of Environmental Conservation, our Department of Health, and our Public Service Commission are moving forward with water and wastewater cybersecurity minimum standards, as well as a grant program and technical assistance program, which is built upon the cybersecurity performance goals shared by the Environmental Protection Agency and the Cybersecurity Information Security Agency. And so we think that our approach by, threat-centric, risk-centric, and cost-conscious minimum standards paired with technical assistance and grant programs, the likes of which are deeply and importantly integrated with the state and local cybersecurity grant program, are important for especially rural communities and those areas.
If I can follow up, and any of you guys can jump in. The rural community part you mentioned, how should rural communities build out their capacity, especially? I would like you to kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think as my co-panelists have all said, we need to make our shared services easy to consume for a person who has a lot of other jobs. We also have Ed, who is the Deputy County Executive of Real County. He's also a full-time exterminator, father of 3, and the IT guy. So this has to work for Ed. Ed is a smart guy. It's not that Ed's not a smart guy and Ed doesn't care. That's not true. It's that he is very busy. So sending Ed a PDF isn't going to help Ed. Sending Ed something he can double-click that's more like a sandwich than a puppy, I think has been our approach and has been one that has led to 55 counties, 34 cities, villages, and towns, dozens of sheriff's offices across the state participating in our shared services program.
Anyone else want to jump into this conversation?
Yeah, I would just reiterate that low-touch, high-impact solutions of what we have seen be successful across Tennessee. The rural communities have a strong commitment to increasing their cyber protection, but they don't have the manpower. And so managed solutions and different types of automated solutions are going to be critical for those areas.
And just to triple stomp it, we include managed services along with all the shared services that we provide. So they'll have assistance from from either a third-party managed service provider or from the solution provider itself to help install and configure and get these solutions set up right. Because just as stated by Mr. Ahern, these people have lots of different roles, very, very busy. They really need help to be able to get this stuff going, or it'll just sit on the shelf.
My time is running out, but I do want to highlight the fact that we're also focused on workforce, and I think that's an area that we need to create pathways into the cybersecurity space to build out capacity, not only in the urban centers, but in the rural communities as well. And I'd love to follow up with you and partner with you on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time.
Gentleman yields back. I recognize the ranking member, Mrs. Ramirez, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, this is certainly a really critical conversation. I just want to thank our witnesses for being here and the work that you're doing. The cost of keeping up with the growing cyber attacks and the threats that we see every single day, while, as Mr. Jane was sharing, these technologies continue to advance at rates that we didn't even imagine a year ago, mean that you're going to need more resources to do so. And as you've heard from both sides here, as we've had this discussion today, the reality is that we don't want to talk about funding, but we need funding in order to be able to do this work. And so I do think it's really important for us to make the connections between what level of funding we need and what it's actually going to do. Because I think that for our colleagues, as we leave this committee and talk to our colleagues within Congress, it's important for them to understand clearly what this additional funding would do and how it would actually expand your structures in order to provide the protections necessary. So I want to, in some ways, follow up to what Congressman Latrell and I think others have brought back here. Ms. Darby, Mr. Ahern, and Mr. Spanholz, what would your state's priorities be if provided additional, not cuts, because we just talked about the reductions that you weren't aware of, but if you were able to receive additional state and local cybersecurity grants, what level of funding would you be able to make in meaningful improvements to your cybersecurity? And I'll start with you, because ladies first.
Thank you. So I would say it's hard to put an exact number on it because I think what I would say is in our previous grant process, which was 21 million of federal funds and the state matched 6.8, bringing us roughly to 28 million for that grant. My CISA would say we could have spent 4 times that. I do think—
Tell me about meaningful improvements and maybe
Yes.
specifics.
So specifically in the future, the approaches that we took, while are still granted and effective today, I think have to pivot to an AI-enabled world. And so part of that may be workforce expansion, part of it may be digital agent expansion, because that is what our adversaries will be leveraging. And so the ability to have the flexibility to understand what is needed this year may be different than next year based on the exponential rate of change. So that flexibility is going to be important, but also the capability to be able to attract the appropriate level of talent and expertise to be able to identify those scalable solutions. The pace of change is here, and things are rapid. We need agent-enabled solutions that are scalable. And so anomalies, both for internal threats and external threats, need to be able to be detected, and we need to be able to rapidly respond 24/7. So those are the areas of focus that we would look for related to the emerging risks that we are facing currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Darby. Mr. Ahern.
I think 3 things, ma'am. Number 1 is defensibility. Number 2 is resilience. And number 3 is legacy technology. With regards to defensibility, shared services that are easy to consume, that are delivered by top-tier enterprise technology partners, things like multi-factor authentication, like network defenses like we've heard. Number 2, resilience. We know bad things are going to happen, so having backups, cloud-based backups, business continuity planning, and other things are very, very important. And with regards to legacy technology, these are systems that have been built over multiple decades by multiple vendors. And if something is old, it is harder to secure, it is harder to maintain. And if something's not reliable, it doesn't matter if it's secure. And obviously, if something isn't secure, it doesn't matter if it's reliable. And so when the technology debt that we have, I think we're going to be under a margin call, if you'll excuse a finance metaphor, because this technology debt is going to come due with these AI threats and the ever-increasing scope of our adversaries. So I believe that these 3 things are the things that we all need to do. And obviously, underpinning all of this is falling in love with the basics every single day.
Yeah.
This is a services business, and these services are delivered by, with, and through technology.
Thank you, Mr. Ahern. Anything else that you want to add, Mr. Spanholz?
I'll just say super briefly that whenever we get an incident in the state, it's usually because we left a door or window open. We've got some sort of vulnerability that should have been taken care of. So using some of these technologies to better identify the critical vulnerabilities that can really cause a big problem is imperative, and then providing the support to the locals to be able to remediate those quickly so we won't have another incident is a pathway to just better continuity of services.
I really appreciate that. I think as we are looking to reauthorize the state and local cybersecurity grant program, hearing these specifics from all of you are really critical in order to ensure that we do so, and we do so providing you the resources necessary to do your work. So thank you, and with that, I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. I go to the gentleman from California, Mr. Fong.
Thank you for the second round. As I wanted to follow up on the workforce issue that I just mentioned earlier. I'm working with my community college to set up a certificate program to allow our students to go into the cybersecurity industry and world. We've had hearings in the past about how there's a challenge, and as we mentioned before, the rural communities definitely have a more challenging need when it comes to workforce. I'm curious if you could share maybe your work in Tennessee or New York or Florida about how you're addressing the workforce challenge of those in the cybersecurity space.
Go ahead.
A quick story from Florida. So we spend about $35 million a year on an education workforce development program to be able to provide certifications, training, tabletops, lots of different cybersecurity related education opportunities for all public employees, whether it's education, state, local, across the board. Had a lot of great participation with that, and that's been effective to be able to upskill the workforce around the state and have us better prepared.
I think a couple of things. Number one is we have a deep and longstanding relationship with our community colleges. We have numerous cyber clinics across the state, including several that are part of the National Security Agency Cyber Clinics program, which is fantastic. I was fortunate enough, actually, 2 months ago to be at Utica University outside of Rome, New York, where they inaugurated a cyber range, which is an avenue in which both at the associates and the bachelor's and the graduate level, students and community members can participate in real-life cyber exercises, but in a safe and controlled environment. And third thing I'd mention, sir, is curriculum. In New York State, through our partners in the legislature and our state education department, we have a K through 12 computer science for all curriculum, which includes cyberbullying, social media awareness, banking online, and cybersecurity best practices. I have 2 kids in public school, and to hear my daughter ask me if my Gmail had multi-factor warmed my heart, sir.
Yes, in Tennessee, we've taken a multi-prong approach. So I will start with the AI Council that the state has. We have this year set up 2 different subcommittees, one focused specifically on education, which is both K through 12 and higher ed. And part of that focus is not only cybersecurity, but also AI education and the convergence of both. So focusing on bringing practical applied learning solutions to individuals and leveraging vocational schools that exist across the state. We are also focusing on workforce development. So how do we start to proactively develop programs around particular job areas that we expect may have disruption? How do we upskill and transition employees and workforces to be ready for the future and the expectations of those roles? So there's work groups focusing on that. We have also, through grants, supported innovation schools. And so we have a high school in Williamson County that's actually opening in August that is I think is well positioned to be a national landmark of vocational schools, but one of the areas of focus is AI and cybersecurity. So through dual enrollment with Tennessee universities, they will graduate from high school with certifications where they are employable at the day of graduation. And then at the state, we have a cybersecurity internship program. And so we are on our 3rd year with that program, but have seen great success where the graduates of our program, after they have completed their college education, have 100% been employable in the cybersecurity field with employers in Tennessee or nationally. And then the last, I would just say, there was a question earlier, are any of the states working with the Department of Energy? So we are blessed to have Oak Ridge National Lab as an asset within the state of Tennessee. We have a very strong partnership with them. They also serve on the AI Council and are active participants in many of the programs that I just mentioned.
Thank you very much. I think there's a lot of best practices I think I've heard. I know the chairman and I have talked about our community colleges and how we can enhance those pathways. And so maybe we can have a further discussion about how we address this and go, learn from my state, California, how we can learn from you and vice versa. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and as we're closing out, and we got both you gentlemen had some closing remarks. We'll get to you. I do want to just touch on the recent NAS-CIO Deloitte survey talking about workforce. In your margin call, sir, shows that only 1 in 5 state CISOs believes their cyber workforce has the skills to meet the threats that they're facing. And then which is just that's a huge drop from just 2 years ago. And then additionally, that NAS-CIO Deloitte survey found that state CISO confidence in protecting state information assets has dropped by more than half in 4 years, and that 0 state CISOs are very confident in the cybersecurity practices of their local governments, which somewhat touches on, Ms. Darby, on this idea of digital agents in protecting one's infrastructure. And so part of my question as each of you close out is, when you think about that toolbox that and essentially needs to be created in coordination with the federal government, with some of our state leaders and agencies and nonprofits, et cetera, do you see those agents being created by us? Are we partnering with, Grok or whomever? But then again, we're housing it so we can share it, because it's got to be easily consumable, right? Click it and deploy it. Because again, Bill, who's a fantastic guy, amazing American, great at his job, he's also one guy. Mr. Ahern.
I think it's a great point, sir. And I think we need to think laterally with regards to how we're approaching these problems, because one of the other things that we're seeing is, in addition to this continued uptick, the water continuing to boil ever faster, we're seeing the collapse of deterrence, as you mentioned, sir. When you, with an individual on a laptop, can have the same capability as the MSS, that fundamentally changes how we as a government, as a people, as a civil society need to think about these risks. So things like infrastructure as code, using vendor best practices. Obviously, we talked about some of the enhancements to the operationalization of the grant program. These, I think, sir, are all part of a story where how we deliver these services is not going to look, like you said, 5 years from now like it looked 5 years before. And that's both because the expectations of our citizens are changing, but also because the risks that these systems are facing are changing so fundamentally and changing so quickly.
Yes, so in closing, I would say preventative, not reactive, is really the theme that Tennessee has adopted. And we've discussed here that the pace of change has exponentially shifted, and we're seeing increasingly sophisticated adversaries leveraging automation and artificial intelligence to accelerate attacks and reduce time available for defenders to respond. So Tennessee plans to continue to build on the whole-of-state approach and the improvements that we have made, which were 19.2% maturity over the last 3 years that we have reported. With that, we also need to continue to partner with private sector. We also meet regularly with our model partners around how do we get AI agents created in ways that will help us accelerate. So from Tennessee's approach, we think it's a mix of partnering with the private sector to ensure that they have solutions within the tools that we use that can be rapidly deployed to continue to keep state assets and our communities and our private entities protected. The other element is we recognize within the state, but also many of our private organizations that operate within the state of Tennessee also have their own proprietary solutions and architectures and will be building their own agents. We need access from a model perspective to be able to also respond, not just rely on vendor tools. For those organizations that have that sophistication, and it also better positions Tennessee to be able to help the local communities, municipalities, law enforcement, et cetera, if they have proprietary solutions that are not dependent on private sector tools that might be available. So with that, the last thing I would mention is we talked about AI governance and bad actors. Do they follow the same rules that we do? And we have positioned ourselves through the AI Council as being very focused on AI governance, transparency, and safety. But we recognize that our adversaries don't respect the same rules and do not possess the same values. We must be positioned in Tennessee and across the nation to respond at the speed of this technology. And that requires that we have frameworks that are nimble, adaptable, and rules within programs that allow us to adapt based on the threat landscape to protect our states, but also the nation.
I want to say thank you to all the witnesses for their testimony and the members for their questions. Members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we would ask the witnesses to respond to these in writing pursuant to Committee Rule 7E. The hearing record will be open for 10 days. Without objection, I'm entering into the record a letter from the Consortium for School Networking dated May 18th, 2026, and a letter from the Software Information Industry Association dated May 19th, 2026. And as they are about to call votes without objection, this subcommittee stands adjourned.